Man, okay. 7 o'clock, April 19th, 2022. Planning Commission work session. And the topic of discussion is VRD density. So I prepared a little statement here. As we know, the current Seaside stock of housing is at an all-time low. From January 1, 2022 through April 15th, 2022, 160 homes, condos, and a few lots were sold. That's in 1.5 quarters. I mean, 1 quarter in 2 weeks. 37 of them are in the approved VRD zones. So we know that long-time rentals, houses and apartments are non-existent. We currently have 4 apartment complexes that are in different states of construction, but we know nothing's gonna be available for probably another 9 months. We have a housing task force led by City Councilor President Steve Wright, and they meet monthly. So what can the Planning Commission do? In November 2019, in working with the City Council, and Seth was a part of that workshop, we had a joint workshop, and the following PC policies were approved. We capped the number of active VRDs per owner to 1. Some owners own more than 1 license. You know, some of them have 5, as we know, but those are grandfathered until the property changes ownership. We adjusted the density in the zones. We determined that the applicant must be the owner and no agent can hold a permit. We determined that we require local contact. We nailed down the parking and the bedroom ratio, even though the ordinance reads 2 parking spaces minimum. But if you have 5 bedrooms, you need 5 parking spaces. So that's what we're talking about, the ratio. So that's a 1-to-1 issue, minimum 2. No VRDs are allowed in the main house or an ADU. And we also determined, rather than 5-year inspections, annual inspections. So the Planning Commission we can do. And that's quite a bit, considering that was 3 years ago. So this is the big question. When we're looking historically at the numbers that Jeff's brought to us in several different publications, you know, there's a rise and fall of VRD permits. And so do we have a VRD density issue? So in the zoning, the residential resort has no spatial limitations. So, I mean, you can have 100% of homes in the RR zone as VRDs. Both R2 and R3 have a 20%, now this is per the zoning book, have a 20% cap before they're subject to conditional use. Now, I am not familiar with RC. I mean, that's residential commercial, but I did look in there and I didn't see that they have any spatial requirements either, or limitations.
I believe the RC zone, you can't have a vacation rental dwelling in the RC zone. I got the zoning ordinance right here. Let me look.
Yeah, I found that it's on there. But anyway, I didn't notice that.
Yep. You're right, it is.
Yep, and I didn't see where it was subject to spatial limitations. No. So that's something we need to talk about.
Is that the RC zone?
RC. Let's see, and as I mentioned last time we were together, as per the comp plan, R3 should be for full-time residents only, yada, yada. I mean, we've got a couple of other policies that we can deal with, but anyway, putting out the question, do we have a VRD density issue?
So real quick, I pulled up the zoning map, and our RC zone, predominantly along Roosevelt, looks like from downtown 2nd Avenue out to 12th. So it's going to be the orange area right there. So it's already outside of the area where the policy is set to not approve short-term rentals east of Holiday.
Okay. although even
It's
though,
not explicitly called out as
It's
not
not
allowed.
called out in the ordinance, it's set by policy.
okay,
Okay.
maybe, well, that's down the line, but if we ever wanted to tweak the ordinance, that's where it needs to be tweaked, so it's definitive. Because when you're reading something from an outsider's point of view, you know, that tells me, hey, I have an opportunity here, you know. So I'm gonna put a note to that. So, Don, I'm gonna call on you first, because you've been on the planning commission. And what was your experience back then? And I don't know when you were on the planning commission, so please tell us all, and everybody, this is Don. if you
Almost
haven't
30
met him.
years ago now.
Okay.
Yeah, in fact, when I was on the planning commission, we did not have a VRD ordinance. We had no vacation. We had one guy, Doug Barker,
Oh, yeah.
would come around and he would try to assist the in inspections and stuff as a part-time basis. We eventually, over the period of the 30-some years, developed the ordinance as it is today. And it's taken all those years to get where we are today. And so I'm just kind of, you know, we've had the benchmark for VRDs. We have cities come, at least that used to come, and grab our ordinances and copy them to be used in their cities. So, you know, it's a pretty strong ordinance that we have. Now, I don't know what tweaking we're doing, but I'll learn about that as we go along. But there has been a lot of hours built into what we have today. So I'll be interested to see where you guys go from here. And if I can help with some history, I'll try to help you out there.
Wonderful, that's great. So, anybody, let's hear your points of view.
I haven't been here long enough to absorb it all, but from what I see so far, I see the red line coming up real fast, but I don't see where it's scary.
Where it is or it's not?
Where we are now, I don't. You know, it's just evident that we're getting close to the cap.
And that's it, we don't have a definitive number like other towns around us do. We don't have a cap. We're, with the exception of just looking at what Jeff has, like I said, given us regarding the growth. I mean, just since in 2021, we had 375, and now I think we're at, what, 384, Jeff, something like that?
Vacation rental dwellings, we're down to
394.
346. We're talking total short-term rentals, which includes your bed and breakfasts, your transient rental condos, which are the condo complexes in the RR zone and the Whalers Point up on the hill. We're right around that 400 number still. I haven't looked at that.
And are those licenses are the ones that are being active today? Because there's many vacation rental licenses out there that are not active. They have just been grandfathered and have been around for a while.
Yeah, I took a look at our tax reporting data because it's gotten a lot better over the last 2 or 3 years. And we've got about 30 short-term rentals that report to us that they have no rental activity because they're maintaining their permit. A lot of them have long-term tenants in them, but they're not actively using their short-term rental permit. So the permit's still active as long as they maintain their business license, but it's not necessarily being used. In our recent spring cleaning we've been doing, I found a few things were brought to my attention. I've got some local contact lists from 1998, 2004, and 2005. So in 98, this list has 285 short-term rentals on it. This one from 2005 is 290. Here's one from 2004 that's 279. And another one from 2005 has 297. I don't know how accurate these numbers are or what they can tell us, but it seems like we've had a pretty steady amount of vacation rentals since at least the early 2000s. And like I said, right now, vacation rental dwellings, we're about 345. Transient rental condos, we lost the Seaside Beach Club. They became a condo hotel this year. So there's, I don't know how many units were in there that are now out of the vacation rental total inventory. But we seem to float right around that number of 400 total bed and breakfasts, vacation rental dwellings, and transient rental condos.
So a question for you, in the condo world, if you've got a condo building or complex of, let's just 100 units to round it out, are those subject to, how do you determine that with or without using density? I mean, can 100% of those condos?
Yes. All of our condo complexes except the, is it the Riverwalk that's right here, and Whalers Point are in the resort residential zone. So they wouldn't be subject to density requirements anyway.
I see, okay.
Those in the resort residential zone can also operate as a hotel under one hotel license because they meet the requirements for a hotel. It's outright permitted in the zone. They have one parking space per unit plus one for the manager. The condo restrictions for parking are actually greater than that of having a hotel. But there's never really been any density requirements set for the condos.
Now, the reason I was asking, I was thinking about, where is, I think it's called the Bridgewater,
Bridgeport?
Bridgeport, thank you. Okay, now that's interesting, none of these are listed, I mean, it's not on the VRD map, but from what I understand, people are operating,
Here is the local contact map for Bridgeport. Those are the permitted condos that are in operation right there. So there's, trying to zoom in.
okay, they're not in an RR zone though.
They are.
They are?
Yeah, they are. This is the local contact map. I didn't put transient rental condos in this map. So this is Bridgeport right here on that map. I didn't put the condos in there.
Okay.
I just did the vacation rental dwellings, the single family homes and duplexes and triplexes.
I see, okay.
So I have a couple questions and a statement, if that's all right. All right. So Jeff, is there any? I think I saw one on the map, but is there any VRDs that are approved east of Holiday that have just been grandfathered in?
Yes, there's three. Well, not necessarily east of Holiday, but outside of the red line. There's these two off of 12th. Both of these are long-term rentals. They're not being used as short-term rentals. And then we've got one that's in the Cove. And I honestly don't know if this one's being utilized as a rental or not. But those were established prior to the line in the sand being drawn.
And then did we ever get any kind of just rough estimate of, let's say, if we go through the different zoning and we hit the 50% benchmark where 50% is allowed, 40% where 40% is allowed, and then we have 100% density, let's say hypothetically, where it's an outright use, do we have any kind of estimate of what that would, how many vacation rentals that would entail? Is it thousands or?
I did kind of a aerial analysis. I don't have the data with me. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I think it was over around 1,100 or so. And that's basically taking the Google Street View, determining how many properties on each road could potentially meet the parking requirements. Not exact science, but it gives me the ability to weed out certain properties.
Yeah, that's a good benchmark.
And what we found, especially recently, because there's two properties that are, I think, active listings right now. One of them is a duplex. I think the other one has 3 units, but at face value, they look like single-family dwellings. We get tons of calls on those. I think I had 4 to 6 reject phone calls today where it's an outright, no, you don't have the parking, you're not going to meet the requirement on those properties. Mm-hmm. I don't know how many Jordan and Ann took, but we've just been bombarded with phone calls on these. But at face value, they look like a single-family dwelling, but you really dig into it, they've got 2 small rental units, and they don't meet the parking requirement, and so we just kind of shut it down right there.
Got it. I just have some basic comments. I'll go through real quick. So as far as vacation rentals, my thought has always been this is definitely a commercial use in a residential zone. I mean, that's what it is. And I think it needs to be kind of set in a different class compared to like hotels and other things that are more of an outright use. And this is a commercial zoned area. And whenever we kind of have those conversations with, I know the vacation rental owners, they want to be compared to a hotel, but I don't think that's a fair comparison because this is a residential zone that they're operating a commercial business on. So I always keep that in mind when I'm thinking about vacation rentals. And I think the regulation is definitely important. It's one of those things that I think we need to be on it or it will spiral out of control. But if you really look at the data that Jeff just went over and how many are possible, I just don't see a mass proliferation of vacation rentals taking over, all the zones that are available. I mean, it could happen, but I just don't think there's enough demand for people to operate that at this point to really be concerned with that. I think regulation is important, but I'm not concerned that they're just going to take over the whole town. But I will say that, when I was on the housing task force and all the work I did on the city council, if you really look at short-term housing, even if we were to take away a lot of the vacation rental permits we have right now, the chances of those being long-term housing, a lot of them are it's just probably not going to happen. They're too expensive of houses. The rents would be outrageous. No one that's in the workforce would be able to, in most cases, be able to afford a lot of these beachfront houses. So my overall feeling on our current vacation rental situation is I think that we have a pretty good system going on. I think we need to stay on top of it. But I'm not concerned about a mass proliferation at this point. And I think that we need to find other ways to find short-term housing because I personally don't feel that pulling permits or even capping it is going to bring more short-term housing into the market. I think we need to figure out a way to develop smaller properties, less parking requirements, things like that, higher density, and I think that will bring more short-term housing.
So not even.
Thank you.
Considering tweaking the density numbers? Sorry. Considering tweaking the density numbers, you don't think it needs to be done at this time?
I would consider anything, but my personal opinion on it currently is that I think we're okay. But yeah, I'm always open to hearing new information. Absolutely.
Brandon, what do you have to say?
Well, I did some brief looking at Cannon Beach's VRD law or rules, and then I went up to Astoria. Asked if, and please correct me if I'm wrong. It's my first time doing this. Astoria doesn't permit it unless the owner lives on site, and it's very, very strict with Astoria. So there's not even a model that's like what Seaside has. Seaside's 40 and 50%, I think, is rather generous. If you look down in Cannon Beach, I believe it's 15 and 20%. 15% is the cap, no more than 20%. So if that one property puts it over, the 15% mark, I believe that's how it works. I'm not an expert in it. I think 40 and 50% for what we have is a little too high, and we should consider potentially bringing it down a bit. You gave a really good point. I like what you said. I was like, oh, okay, well that's another perspective I didn't think about. Especially if that number is potentially 1,100 for if we were 100% full saturated rough number, 1,100. I took some notes, possibly reducing it going forward. Are the owners of these VRDs, are they required to live in the state? Or can they be from anywhere?
They can be anywhere.
They can be
Have a
anywhere.
microphone.
They can be anywhere.
They are.
And they
So-
are.
But they have to have a person on site to manage the property.
They
Correct.
have to
A
have
local contact. So then the taxes, and you said there are 30 houses that are saying that they're not making revenue off of it are they stating why they're not making revenue?
No, they're just people have vacation rental permits. They retire here. They live in their house now, but they maintain their permit for their children.
Okay.
There's a variety of reasons. The two outside the zone, I know one of them, I believe, lives in California, and it's a long-term rental, but at some point they may move back to the area and want to use their house again, so they keep their short-term rental permit. There's a variety of reasons that I've been told of why people do maintain their permit.
But they do report. They do have to report.
They
Yeah.
do report, or they report once a year that
Right.
just says, I won't be renting this year, but I'm maintaining my permit.
Okay.
and they still pay their fees.
Oh,
And
yeah.
they still get inspected?
If they're subject to annual or 5-year inspections, we've kind of, it's tough. If they're in a long-term rental situation, I don't want to be intrusive into a long-term rental situation. So that's a situation where we've kind of said, you know what, if you're going to start short-term renting again, before you do, let's get the inspection done. Right now, I'm still working through the 5-year inspections, and lately with everything that's going on in our office and then the busy season started, I've kind of stopped doing those, and we'll pick them back up hopefully in the fall. But with the program that we run, it's pretty easy for me to tell if anybody's advertising on any platform. About 35 different platforms it pulls from. So if there's a rental that I suspect needs an inspection and they've started advertising, I can very easily look at that.
How often does that happen?
That
People just try to do it without registering for a permit, try to do.
it's really tapered off this year. I don't know how many I've gotten this year, maybe one.
Oh, wow.
I get,
Yeah.
well, we can take a look.
I think the word is out.
Yeah, so this is the program that we run. So this reports about, I don't know, twice a week. Right now I have 4 Airbnb advertisements to review, and we can look at them and see what they are. So it'll actually pull up the listing for me. So this is a new listing. Oh, I've seen this one, so I know what this one is, I think. So basically it tells me this is a new listing that's available to look at. They have people behind the scenes that try to find the address and figure it out. If they can't figure it out, then I get notified, hey, this is something we can't figure out. And it matches it with our data for who's got a license and who doesn't. So I can go in here and look, and I do once or twice a week just to see if there's anything that really stands out. We get a lot of new listings because of the World Mark. All of those show up in this program. It tells me every time that they list something, or our property managers, if it changes from one manager to another, well, that's going to be a new listing. So it keeps track of all that for me. So I don't have to necessarily spend a lot of time in here, but every once in a while, I'll get a little notification down here that'll needs more research. That's the one I look for because they haven't been able to determine where that property is, but they believe it to be in Seaside. And then I've got non-compliant listings, and the 2 that are in there now have been shut down. Although their listing's still active, but they're not actively renting it.
Do they show you, so do you have it narrowed down to just showing you things in one zone or all of Seaside? So
All of Seaside, and then I get every once in a while it'll kick me one from unincorporated Clatsop County because they haven't narrowed down an exact address for it, but they know it's close to our area. And I believe Clatsop County is running the same program now as we are, so they're doing it too. But this looks at the big ones, VRBO, Flipkey, Airbnb, and others usually Craigslist ads. Those ones are a little trickier to narrow down because they don't stay up very long. But every once in a while, we're able to figure out where they come from. They research the metadata behind a lot of the photos too. That gives them GPS coordinates. And my favorites are the ones where they post pictures of the front of the house that has the address on it. But you're right. I think word has kind of gotten out, and there's just not a lot of people that try without talking to us first and going through the permitting process.
Yeah, Chair Montero, one follow-up question after Brandon's comments is, I know when we originally came up with a lot of the VRD rules, it's pretty easy to like eat around the edges with raising the fee and stuff, but I know that where we need to have probably maybe a legal opinion is when we start tweaking density, because part of that is a property rights thing, because people have bought the property with certain restrictions already on the books. So I'm not saying that's something we couldn't do if the commission wanted to, but I know that's something we need to look further into, because I think the density changes are where it starts kind of walking that fine line.
Are you referring to property whatever is in play is grandfathered. So if we reduce the 40% area to a 35, 30, whatever, what already is there is grandfathered.
Yeah.
But should a property be sold,
Yep.
then that property is subject to.
Yep.
So,
And,
That would be the safe way to do it. But
that's
yeah,
the only
yeah,
way to
okay.
do it.
well,
Oh,
and,
yeah.
and that leads me to a question. So we discuss our vacation rental process as an application. An application infers the ability to say no. If this is truly not an application process, it's a permitting process that isn't actually applying with the variables that you may not get that permission, then, those are two different things. And so if people are purchasing property with the assumption that they are getting permission to rent it as a vacation rental, well, if it's not a given, then that's a mistake on their part. And so
The only
if-
given is the RR zone.
Right, exactly. And so if you're purchasing it in that zone, then you've got outright rights to use it as a vacation rental. And if you're not, then there is a chance that 5 other applications may come in before you submit yours, and then you are not allowed anymore. So there's never 100% you buy a property and you can turn it into a vacation rental. So to me, I like to look at it from that perspective. If I'm purchasing a property, there is a certain amount of variables that go into considering that. And so if we're discussing density limits, I think that, part of our comp plan obligation is to preserve residential areas and the residential atmosphere of our town for residents, not only provide a playground for visitors. That is part of also the comprehensive plan, is for us to provide entertainment and a welcoming place for people to visit. That is included in the comp plan. However, at the cost of residents is where I am feeling the rub right now. And I don't think that it would be okay for us to allow it to get to a critical point more than it is now, because we're already seeing that with the density that we're at right now,
Which is double of what's in the comp plan.
right, we're at critical, because we are losing employees, not just hospitality workers, but employees of higher status because they can't find a place to live. And I, a couple years ago, would have said the same thing as Seth just said about, these vacation rentals would never be residential places. But we have seen over the last 2 years, residences that would be rented and were rented as permanent, as long-term rentals turned into vacation rentals. And so I think now's the time to look at those density numbers and potentially a density and a cap. So if we get to 400, that's it. It doesn't matter whether the density in your particular neighborhood is not up to the density cap. We hit 400. At this moment, that's as many as we're gonna have. And I just pulled that number out of the hat, no scientific research. But if we're thinking about the crisis situation that we're in right now, with the numbers where they are, if we let it get past 400, then we are no longer a town with residents. We are a vacation resort, period. And I would hate to see it get to that.
Jeff,
So that's my
wow, thank you.
long-winded spiel.
No.
If I could also, I could not live in Seaside. I could not afford my house today. So, there's a lot of it right there, is the inflation upon your house. Mine's gone through the roof, and I'm sure all of yours have. And if you look back, you can't afford to live in your house now either. So, you have to look at that. It takes a pretty strong wage to pay for some of these $500,000 houses.
That is 2 bedroom and 1 bath.
Exactly.
And 1,200 square feet.
Well, to your point, I have had multiple high-profile staff managers and such. Currently, have one that has not had a place since the end of December and is in a waiting period after waiting period after waiting period. They're taken care of right now, but it is a big problem. I had a question. When somebody purchases a house in Seaside, is there any form of waiting period that you must finalize the sale of your home, wait 90 days, and then may apply for a short-term permit?
The current policy is as soon as they close on the house, they can apply, but not before that.
Okay, so that's another consideration. Maybe we add there be a waiting period after the sale of a home, so people aren't coming in and just purchasing homes just to flip it into a vacation rental. One of the things in the industry, in my industry that I work in, is and let me preface this. My opinion, I work in hospitality in hotels, and my opinion about short-term rentals has always been, when Airbnb came out, I said it from the beginning, I think it's only going to help the hotel industry, and it really has. Short-term rentals, VRDs, provide a different experience for people who are looking at that experience. We actually saw a decrease in complaints of people saying, well, we stayed for a week, they didn't have a kitchen, they didn't have this, we had a big family. It actually took those complaints in that market segment and it put it where it needed to be. So I've always been for VRDs. Now, on the housing crisis side of it that we're dealing with massively, I have applicants every single week that say, great, we would love to come and work for you. Can you house us? Can you get us housing? Is it, what is open, what is available? And so that's just putting that out there, that's my stance on it. Are there, when somebody purchases a hotel that doesn't have experience running a hotel, and they want to put a brand on it, if the brand agrees to come in and be put on that hotel, say X brand that has big, a huge network and reservation system, they require that hotelier to anywhere between 1 to 5 years put hire a management company to come in professionally manage, so they know that the asset's going to be taken care of. Is there any? My understanding is as long as there's just a local contact, there's not any type of that requirement. Correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Are there any issues with VRDs on any scale that was turned into a short-term vacation rental? All of a sudden, police are showing up. It's not well kept. Anything like that happening?
We keep track of our complaints, but for the most part, folks in the management companies stay on top of them. We have this map right here is publicly available. Just a quick web form on the City of Seaside webpage. You can click on any one of the icons, and it'll tell you who the local contact is and their phone number. So this has been very helpful for management companies because now they're getting called if there's a complaint. They understand the expectation is that they have 2 hours to address the complaint. And this is a number I watch frequently. This map has been up, I don't know, I can't remember when I put this up, about a year and a few months maybe. Since it went live, it's had 7,153 views. Now those aren't unique views; those are people accessing it over and over. Some of them, but it's being used by neighbors, by management companies, by us.
So if a property gets a complaint and that complaint then goes to the contact, how many times is that allowed to happen before it actually triggers an alert for action from,
Unless they file the complaint with us as well, then there's no way that I actually know about the complaint. Once the complaint is filed with us, my speech to them is generally, please make sure you let the local contact know, but I also want to know. You can email me, you can call me, you can fill out the form, however you want to do it. And then we can start tracking it. If it's a repeat issue, then we start working with the management company or the local contact, or in some cases the property owner, if I'm having issues with the local contact or the property manager, to resolve the issue. So far, we've been able to resolve issues without having to come in front of the planning commission. I will say it's been very close on twice now where we were headed to a compliance hearing with the planning commission, and that kind of got their attention. But those are, like I said, I track complaints when I do get called. I have a tracking sheet. I write a report. It goes into the computer program where I can access that. When I pull up the property file, it tells me what complaints they've had. I can read what I wrote about the complaint, how it was followed up on, how it was handled. And I think this year so far, I've only gotten 7 complaints that have come to me. I think 1 or 2 of them was actually a city staff complaint on a property that there was an issue. I think one of them was the property manager or the property local contact did not respond appropriately, which is a big issue. And that's one we get on them very quickly about.
And are the addresses cross-referenced with any police reports and police calls?
On occasion, I will get police reports forwarded to me. Every once in a while, an officer will actually send me hey, this was an issue at this vacation rental this weekend. Usually it's parking issues. That seems to be our number one problem still, is
And
parking.
those are registered as official complaints, or are they
Yes.
just kind of floating out there as a whole different thing?
Nope, I take those, treat them just like any other complaint. Because if it's a parking issue, that's usually the easiest one for me to address with the local contact or the property owner is, let's look at your parking situation. And, oh, your parking space that's supposed to be used inside the garage is now a ping pong table. Weird. That's why you're getting parking complaints. And we can usually get on top of it that way. But no, it's not we're just not going to address it. We want to track these because my experience with our property management companies is when we start working on a problem at a house, they're very receptive to working on that problem and making it stop. They don't want the issues. They don't want to get called, and they know that we're telling people to call them first. So they're getting the phone call in the middle of the night. They don't want that. Mm-hmm. So they're really receptive to getting involved in actively managing these properties.
Hey, Lou,
Yes, ma'am.
remember when we were working in that room, looking over the map and the...
Right.
I couldn't find my information. Do you happen to recall what the previous numbers were as far as our density is concerned?
No, not right off the top of my head. I'd have to go home and look it all up.
I'd like to make a follow-up to what Brandon said. As far as, I think, it's important to kind of look at what's the purpose of the VRD ordinances in general. Why do we allow them? And, you see what cities like Gerhardt do. And I think the purpose, at least in my mind, and, you guys all, I'm sure, have your own opinion, but it's people that, let's say they live in Portland or Seattle, and they want to have a beach house, but they can't afford a beach house unless they rent it sometimes, right? That's the original purpose, is people want to have their summer home, but they're not going to be here all year, so they want to be able to rent it out. And I always am hesitant to take that away. I think what Brandon brought up, the whole 90-day wait to get a VRD, what that does is makes a disincentive for folks that are just using this as a money-making scheme, and they're not even really planning on coming to Seaside. It's like, hey, I want to make money, so I'm going to buy a property and I'm going to rent it. So I think there should be a distinction there that definitely the purpose of the whole VRD ordinance, in my mind, is for people to be able to have that beach house and make a little money so they can pay the high taxes that we have and all those things. So just wanted to point that out. I think it was a good point and maybe something to consider.
Well, actually, it's funny because that was on my list. Oh, good. And I went through other town ordinances to see if they had a minimum owner before they were granted a license. And the only thing I could, and I know I read it somewhere else besides in my head, but I did notice in, oh gosh, is it Lincoln City, Garibaldi? One of them requires that if you are building a new home, that home has to be a minimum of 3 years old before it can become a vacation rental, which I thought was interesting. So, I mean, that's options, looking at, I mean, if we want to take any action. Minimum time of ownership, tweaking the density, like, let's face it, affordable housing is not on the Prom. It's not on Sunset Boulevard. Right now, those are capped at 50%. I don't see, even if they were 100%, I mean, it's not going to affect the affordability of residents. So you could act, if we feel the need to trade density, we could, lower R3, up the beach zone. Just, if we don't want to do anything, that's fine. I just thought we should,
Well, I mean, I think
Discuss.
that, that brings up an interesting point, because I feel like, for myself, when we have these discussions, my brain often goes to affordable workforce type housing. And that is a certain category of affordability that we're looking at. But we're seeing right now that it's not only, as I was saying, hospitality wage earning employees that can't find housing, it's executives and administrators that also can't find housing. So that market may actually be affordable for them if it was full-time, long-term rental. Not if it's in the type of market that it is right now. Not if it is potentially vacation rental, then it wouldn't, then that price is never gonna pencil out. But there are people out there that may choose to rent it for long-term because they don't have the desire to use it at this moment, or the desire to deal with all of the hoops that you have to jump through to comply. But I think that you've got an idea there as to maybe change our overall blanket regulations as far as where more density is allowed and where less density is allowed. And with those types of changes, I think that we also have to look at the language in some of our policies already and tighten it up a little bit, because I feel like the more we tighten up what's allowed, the more people are going to look for the loopholes. And so, us assuming that people only own one property based on the fact that their name is only on one property doesn't prohibit somebody from forming an LLC and then, joining up with a different family member to be on a
we've had
property.
that discussion.
So I think that is something that we need to look at and specifically call out that, no, we're not talking about serial franchising of ownerships either. That's not okay. And so as we work through those things, we need to look at what else we might need to tighten up as far as our rules.
I think that particular issue is tightened up, isn't it, Jeff?
Yeah, I research our new applicants as much as I possibly can, especially if there's any kind of LLC tied to the ownership of the home or the applicant themselves, to see if they're already a VRD owner or if they are trying to circumvent whatever regulations and policies we already have in place. I will say there are a few LLCs that own VRDs in town that I know of that are a family that formed an LLC, and it's mom and dad and the kids. That's their initials is their LLC. Just something fun for them to do while being able to keep their house in a limited liability for their purposes. So there's quite a bit of that happens. But we do try to research as much as possible our applicants to try to prevent that from happening.
Well, I mean, and I don't think that LLCs are a bad thing. I think that's, potentially good legal protection for that particular owner, but that doesn't mean that,
It just needs to be
a family of
disclosed.
5 can be an LLC, and then each one of those members can then also own another property
Right.
in any format. So,
What Brandon said about the 90 days before, it, probably not the proper word, but it irritates me to no end when somebody from another state comes in here and says, I want to buy this house and we're going to turn it into vacation rental until we retire in 25 years. And Steph, Brandon down at that end is absolutely right. That is a business. That is not a vacation rental. I'm going to make money. I'm going to let them pay for my my mortgage payment. I'm going to pay all the taxes and stuff. Like that one you pulled up, $647 for a night. He's paying all his taxes, you know?
From a VRD owner standpoint, we haven't used ours in 2.5 years. It's on a long-term rental right now, but we maintain the license.
Yeah.
Even though it's in an RR zone, and I could drop it and pick it up at any time. But as an owner, I tell you, when you have it professionally managed, you're not making diddly squat. You're not making, all you're doing is just maintaining the property as is and keeping it occupied. You're not making money. I'll tell you.
Didn't say
You would make
they're
more
paying
money
the
on a
bills.
long-term rental.
They're paying your bills for
And
it.
that, yes, and
That's
it's a
exactly what they're
wash.
doing.
Yeah.
It's a wash. They're paying the bills. While I lived down in Timbuktu, I got somebody making that house payment for me, paying my state taxes in the state of Oregon. You know, and that irritates me to no end. I totally agree with what Kathy said. There should be a cap. I love 400. 400's a great cap. You know, and have we ever got there? I doubt it.
As far as vacation rental dwellings go, I don't think we've hit that cap.
Well, you know, it's funny you say that because I had these from years ago, and these were from when Debbie was running the Excel spreadsheet, and I literally counted these, and 410. And I think, let's see, I joined Planning Commission in January 19, so 3 years ago. And I got these 410.
Are the condos listed on there as well?
Well, I don't know.
There really wasn't a distinction between.
There is
the
no distinction. I
permits.
mean, you've got your address, you've got your contact owner name and mailing address. There's no specific delineation if it's a house, a condo, or
Yeah.
what it is. But there was 410.
We have
license
about
issues.
50 condos that are licensed and were not distinguished until we started running the new inventory program and management program that we have that now breaks it down between your condos, we have 3 of them that are permitted. 3 of them are permitted as mini motels as a similar use, completely something different than what we ever envisioned. And bed and breakfast too. We've got 6 of those in operation right now as well. And your questions about Astoria, owner has to live on site. They call that the homestay lodging, and that's the new term for a bed and breakfast because it takes the element of or perception that you have to serve food out of the actual process. We have that provision in our ordinance in some of our zones where folks can get permitted, and there have been a few that do and are operating.
Another question for you. On page 11, item 12, business license, room tax requirements, and revocation for non-payments. If at the first paragraph, the last sentence, if the business license fee or transient room tax payments are 30 days past due, the VRD permit will be revoked unless written extension is granted by the finance director. Has that ever happened?
Not that I'm aware of, as we don't. Our office, the planning department, does not deal with the actual tax collection. That's all done through City Hall and the finance.
But wouldn't your department be the one that?
Funny you mentioned that because we actually were looking at one house, I believe this morning, that didn't pay that room transient tax for, I think it said 3 years, and they revoked it in like 2005.
Okay.
So
So
we know of one, but that's just dumb luck that we found it today.
Is that Mark Winstanley, is he
Yeah, it
the
would be
finance
his-
manager?
Right.
Or
and
city
and
manager?
Debbie's the one now that does all the tax stuff
Debbie?
for the city.
Okay.
So in that case, and obviously it's not happened. If it happened to a license today, what is the waiting period? Is there a waiting period to when they can reapply that, or what is the process for them? Are they no longer permitted on that property to have one period? Do they have to go back through the whole process? I don't see, is there a waiting period? I don't see anything in there.
There's nothing that I've seen written that would actually lead to that kind of a process or what the waiting period. If they were to be revoked and come back and get another license, they would have to go through the process under today's standards, not under the standards that they were previously permitted. So that could potentially preclude them from getting a license if the density is too high, or it could put them in front of the planning commission, where you guys have the option to talk about the issues that were previously had with that permit, and that could potentially be a reason to deny it.
I'd like to make a couple points or comments. So as far as tweaking the zoning, if you guys have this in front of you, if you really look at the zoning, it doesn't make a lot of sense where we allow the VRDs, especially when you start getting over to the north of town, Oregon Street and all that. Why are we allowing them over there?
Right off the
Are you talking about the end of
Page
the world?
7.
Well, end of the world is technically this area. Long-time local. This is different, but this area makes zero sense. That's purely a residential area.
Jeff, can you bring
End of the world is very residential as well.
Oh, that's like
And-
24th and Mason.
Yeah. And so,
Three houses sold up there in the last 4 months.
and the reason they're turning to VRDs over there is it's because it's a place people can afford to buy and then flip
Right.
it to a VRD. So to your point of tweaking density, that's probably where we have the biggest issue. And then you look at something like the Prom, 50% density. I mean, who full-time lives on the Prom? I don't know anybody that's local. So it's like, that makes sense to me to be an RR zone type density, but allowing 40% density over here in residential areas, to Kathy's point of keeping the livability of the town, if you're living on the Prom, you know that you're going to be dealing with vacationers. That's just the reality. But if you're living over here at End of the World or, Oregon Street, north side of town, that's a whole different thing. And so I think if we are going to look at density or a cap, maybe some tweaks like that would make a lot of sense.
Well, here's the issue. From the very north point down to Avenue, down to 12th, that is R2 zone. So we either, I don't know, R2 is R2. It would almost have to be rezoned in a different zone.
Yeah.
Unless let's see.
Why we use streets as dividing lines.
I was going to say,
for
could
other
we
things.
use streets?
Well, if you look at, trying to pull it up here, the dividing line up there is Neowana. To make sure I'm talking about the same place you guys were discussing.
I thought it was Oregon Street over there.
Yeah, it's Oregon.
The Oregon, actually, you're right. It's one street west of Oregon.
So Neowana is the dividing line right there.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's predominantly the homes that are on the estuary or one block off.
So I'd say the big area then is End of the World, as Chair Montero pointed out. That is a huge residential area with a lot of locals living in. I don't know if that's the correct name of it, but
Well, that's what I've always called it.
Can you layer
We used to
current?
call it Venice Park.
wasn't there
It is Venice Park,
It is.
yeah.
Can you layer the current VRDs on that map?
Not on a whim, no. But we can look at.
There's only one up there off of 26th and Neowana
So far.
so far.
There's a new application too that's getting worked on right now on
So-
Indian Street.
Jeff, I just want to be clear. You said, east of Neowana
Yep, is not allowed.
is not allowed.
Right.
Okay.
West of Neowana to the estuary. There's 3 up there now, and then a couple on the estuary on Holiday, and then like I said, we've got a new application that just came in right at the intersection of Holiday and Indian Street.
Oh, yeah. I just saw that sale, as a matter of fact,
Yeah.
when I was going through my listing.
So, just, for clarity's sake, I think we're all on the same page as far as if there's any changes made, they wouldn't be retroactive.
Right.
Any
You
existing,
can't retroact.
any existing permits, just saying it out loud so that we actually are all on the
Yes.
same page, that anything existing would remain, and as long as those licenses were maintained, nothing changes for them. But if we do propose changes, they would apply to any new purchases of homes, in case there's
They would
people out
apply
there.
to new applications.
And new purchases of homes, because those applications, right, yes.
On the applications,
Right.
though, I would ask that we get a legal opinion from Dan Van Thiel, because technically, if people have already owned the property, then that's when we're tweaking with property rights. And so I think that would be a safe play for us to at least have that conversation.
You mean it's like if I decided to take out a VRD permit on the home I'm living in?
Yes,
Because I've owned it for, okay.
Correct. Because you bought it with the rights to vacation rental it, technically.
At that time, because the density still would come into play at that time, the density
However,
decisions, which then could change at any point in time, so.
But I would have to still adhere to today's
Right,
restrictions
exactly.
and regulations.
Yeah.
So, and that's the one thing that's always bugged me, and I know that the term LUBO, Land Use Board of Appeals, has been thrown around a lot, that nobody is entitled, unless you're in the RR zone, to a vacation rental license or
Right.
permit.
So maybe it's not needed.
So, I mean, that's my observation anyway. RR, it's flat out. Everything else
Pay your
is
fee, you pay
20%.
the license, and you're in.
I just recall a conversation at our last workshop when we did put these
In
rules.
19?
Yeah, that Dan Van Thiel
Yeah.
did say something about tweaking the density, that
Right.
that's something we got to be careful with, so.
But we did tweak the density.
Did we change the numbers
You bet
at that
we
point?
did.
Okay.
Yes, we did.
We
And Where,
did.
where you're looking at, that is actually through the ordinance. When you look at provision 5 in the vacation rental dwelling ordinance 6137, when it talks about planning commission review, 5A, the use of the property as a VRD will be compatible with the surrounding land uses. So when you start talking about densities, you're talking about the compatibility of a residential zone. And the history is, from what I understand behind that, is to maintain a 50% residential compatibility to that zone, or a 40% residential compatibility to that zone. So when you talk about wanting to adjust those densities, this is where we would talk to Mr. Van Thiel about what that could trigger.
Yeah. And then the other thing is, I know when we had the joint city council planning commission workshop, it was clear at that meeting that it was the city council's purview to cap vacation rentals, I thought. And that's
then
why
they-
it went.
But then they threw it back in our
Yeah.
court.
They did.
I think we can give a recommendation.
He's talking,
Right.
he's talking the one back in 19.
No, I'm talking the one we just had.
Oh, the
Just
one,
had.
okay.
Yeah.
In
About It
21.
was about the
Yeah.
moratorium.
Yeah, that was a moratorium.
That was-
Yeah, the
And they threw-
moratorium.
And they threw the ball back in our court after we threw it.
My point being, though, I think we can just give a recommendation. I'm not sure on that, though. I don't know if we can actually. That's a great question. Can we cap those, Jeff? Do you know? Or is that something we'd have to recommend to city council?
As far as I know, the city council has said they want the final stay. That's
Yeah.
something we
They do. I mean, all we do is
Yeah.
give a recommendation.
Yeah.
And-
or request another joint work session to have these discussions worked out as well.
Well, you know,
In the
as of
end,
the last
yeah.
one, they weren't real interested in discussing it any further.
Yeah.
So that's why I thought, well, do we want to discuss it or not? Because if it's a dead issue.
Well, I was
it's a
gonna
dead
say, anything you bring up or we bring to the council, if they're not interested in it, it's not going any further.
It ain't-
That's
yeah,
true.
it's
That's the
dead
end.
meat.
So I think you need to get with the council again and find out exactly where they want to go, and then we just follow those guidelines.
Well, that was the problem. We didn't get any direction from them whatsoever. However, with that being said, the state of housing versus sales and lack of availability wasn't in our face like it is right at this moment either.
Well, and I would say.
When I went
yeah.
to the housing
Yeah.
study, or the housing group a month and a half ago, and the guest speaker, and I think I already mentioned this, but just in case, I know you weren't here. The guest speaker was Jeff Adams, the Community Development Director from Cannon Beach. And he presents this thing, and it prefaces it all by saying, yes, we have a housing issue. Three days ago, I was just given my eviction notice because my house is being sold and I have nowhere to live. And he was in a state of shock.
Yeah.
But, I mean, so that's what's happening. So if there's something that we can do,
Well,
let's
and-
recommend it.
And I think that there's a difference between us asking the city to, hey, come up with something, and us.
I don't
coming
want to
up
be
with-
reactive. I want to
No,
be
no.
proactive.
Well, us coming up with an official recommendation, this is what we've worked out, this is what we've discussed in our capacity as a planning commission, this is how we see it, this is our experience, we recommend as a planning commission that the city council approve this. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And make it, document it all out. And that's different than saying, hey, we talked about this, we want you to do something now.
Yeah.
And so,
And that's how
making,
we've-
and that's how it should be.
And that's how we've
so
gotten other things through
Right.
before.
Make
the same
policy
exact way.
revision in that way, so.
The exact same way. So far, we've got like a minimum time frame of ownership. I'm just going to write 90-day just as a starting point. 90-day ownership prior to any application to VRD application. The density, as far as tweaking any density goes, R3 is where my heart really is, just because that's what the comp plan states. Right now, we're at 40. 20, of course, is what the comp plan originated at. I would be open to listening to some, any density reduction. Anybody?
I would say that, it's been our experience that we weren't really feeling the pinch when the density was down in the 30 range. Now that it's touching in places over and getting close to the 40% is where we're feeling the critical pinch. So if we bring it back down to 30 and have that be a 30% density, then, it doesn't take away any license, any vacation
Nope.
rental permits that exist already, but it will stop the flood.
Future. It will stop the future ones.
Yeah, I'm open to that number in that area, because that is the only area we probably will be able to salvage some long-term rentals if we make a move. On the prom, I'd be open to putting that 100%. I think that's irrelevant for our long-term rental situation, but definitely the R3 is the spot. Yeah, the yellow. Yeah.
I would agree.
I agree too.
Okay, that's what I had too in my head.
Reduce it,
Yeah, I had
we did
30
not talk before this meeting.
So that actually, Chris Hoth, when we were in our discussions, I remember he didn't care. He didn't care where the beach was at, as far as on the prom or on the, the south side of Sunset, if it was 100%. And I remember we all kind of said no. However, it makes a great bargaining chip. I mean, Erin knows, as her business, you're going to be probably getting a different kind of clientele on a prom house than you are in an R3. I think it's a win-win for anybody. So, let's see. I kind of like that. You got that?
R3 at 30. and
R3
then,
at 30, and the prom.
Problem with the prom is if you
Prom
look,
and-
it's multiple areas. It's also
Yeah.
the cove.
Yeah, the waterfront.
So if you take a look at this map, this is one that shows you your 40% area is the yellow, your 50% area is the blue, your green is your resort residential zoning where it's 100%.
Now, the thing with the blue, that is literally on the west side of Beach Drive, north of Avenue U, correct? It does not go to the east side of Beach Drive.
Right, it's
Okay.
down the middle of Beach Drive.
Okay.
Oceanfront.
Okay, so that would still stay, on the east side would be 50%.
Okay,
Okay,
so the R3 zone, except for the east side
The west side.
of Beach Drive, or west side of Beach Drive would be 50.
Yeah.
30% everywhere else.
yeah. 100% on the water.
100%
So
on the
do
water.
we have any restrictions on non-conforming residences being allowed to be turned into vacation rentals? So we're already giving them an exception. They're not conforming and they're allowed to be built or,
There's a lot of reasons a property could be non-conforming.
Mm-hmm.
If it meets the requirements for a vacation rental dwelling, which is typically your parking requirements, or in some instances, if they're too close to a property line, or there's building code issues, the building official may require additional protections there.
okay.
A
And they
lot
still
of,
have the setbacks and all that jazz.
Well, non-conforming can mean that they don't.
Some of them don't
adhere
meet
to those
setbacks.
setbacks, which is what
I see.
my main thing was, is that if they're non-conforming, especially in that way, that they're also, either A, automatically come to the planning commission for a decision, or outright no.
unless, the way the ordinance is written, unless they're over that 20% density threshold, then the planning commission doesn't see it.
Okay.
So that would be something to consider as you go through the process of potentially revising or rewriting the comprehensive plan and ordinances, would be something to look into, possibly wanting to put in there.
Okay.
Right now, if they're right on the property line or too close, I usually have a conference with the building official on what we can do to make it a safer property. In some instances, he's talked about requiring sprinkler heads on that side of the house. Sometimes it's as simple as a extra firewall separation, just to help create that safety feature between the two properties.
Okay.
But as far as non-conforming properties go, there could be a variety of reasons that make them non-conforming. No parking spaces is one of the most common non-conforming reasons we deny applications or reject people on the phone. It's
Okay.
because they don't have the parking to do this.
Okay, which leads me to the other one, which I also thought was brought up tonight, but would be good, was the ownership requirement. If you're building a new property, it's a time frame before it's allowed, that property can be turned into
Like-
a vacation rental.
Like Garibaldi has,
Right.
they have 3-year.
So that people aren't coming in to build vacation rentals on properties where they didn't exist.
Not that there's a lot of space to do
Right,
that.
but-
And, and I was considering writing that down, and that's what stopped me, is because there isn't anywhere unless something is torn down.
Right,
Right.
But,
right. So,
okay, so we have minimum 90-day ownership prior to VRD application, tweaking the density, 30 R3, 100%. I'm just gonna write beach. Do we want to suggest any new construction within the VRD zone?
as
Be
a waiting period before it's allowed
waiting
to-
period?
I think I have to go with Seth on that, and we need to talk to the city attorney first before we.
Well, all of this will,
Yeah,
you know,
but no,
they would review.
that, before we put a restriction on that heavy,
Okay,
we should probably get
I'll just,
the okay and then proceed.
the okay, yeah.
The okay.
Okay, I'm putting a little love note to myself. Waiting period. Okay. So unless somebody else has another 2 cents about that, I have a question for Jeff that is, does anybody have anything else
I don't,
before I ask Jeff?
Get one more clarification.
Okay.
You want 100% along the ocean front,
On the ocean front?
only in the R3 zone or in the R2
Oh,
zone
no,
as
no,
well?
no. I mean, all the way down.
Okay.
Anything that's.
So anything that's on the ocean front, in the blue that's on the map right here, which is the 50% zone, not all of those are ocean front.
No, only ones on ocean front.
Only ones on ocean front, you want 100%. Okay.
Ocean front, not the ones in the backyard.
Yep.
I'm all for that because I see half those houses sit empty because they're owned by people that never use them and they can't rent them.
Well, and that's the thing, as a neighborhood, I have, a relative, I'll just say, a relative who does not see eye to eye with me on vacation rentals. We're all here because we want to be in, it's a tourist town, so on and so forth. Having those homes occupied helps deter crime. I know that some people see those those houses in their neighborhood with strangers all the time, but the point is they're being occupied. And I think that helps us out, knowing that those 6 empty houses on a square block aren't just invitations for ne'er-do-wells. So, yeah. So my question, this is really going to be an odd one for you. It has to do with the sign code, which is my favorite. So, with all the professional management companies of vacation rentals, whether it's seasidevacationrentals.com or seasidevacationhomes.com, Meredith Lodging, Aaron's company, and so on and so forth, you see a lot of signs on the building. seasidevacationhomes.com, Meredith Lodging, blah, blah, blah. Do the owners of the property managers come in and pay for a permit for those signs to be mounted to those buildings?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
I
Okay.
think in your code, it's stated that the sign has to be on the property.
Not for vacation rental.
Yeah.
So
Jordan might have some insight here.
I mean, it's been, like I said,
Came across that one.
Yeah.
I know they're allowed 2 square feet.
Correct. They're allowed 2 square feet. Something that small for the most part in residential districts isn't
Well,
going
the
to
thing
be.
is this is no longer a residence. It's a commercial property now. It's a business.
It's a residential property with a commercial use. Technically, that sign, I believe, is exempt from structural permits on the building side. He's not really going to look at that. He's just going to look at it and say, well, this isn't going to cause any danger to anybody walking by
Well,
for the
no,
most part.
of course not.
So building permits, not really. Sign permits. In the time I've been here, I haven't seen one for vacation rental homes.
I have never either. So that's why I was asking. But they're
But-
everywhere, and it's advertising.
Yeah,
It's not an address. It's not saying
Well-
the Smiths. It's saying seasidevacationhomes.com. It's advertising on off-site location. That is a sign.
I think that on top of that, it also serves another function, that when those signs are on a short-term rental, it's notifying the neighbors that may not be short-term residents that short-term rental rules apply to that house. And that is a registered, permitted function of that house. When the sign is not there, it's a mystery. Are they permitted? Are they not? Should I complain? Who do I complain to? Who do I, then there's more steps involved in figuring out if there's a compliance issue there or not. So, I mean, I don't know if that's where you were going with
No,
that,
my question
but-
was, does the property management company apply and pay for a permit to put that sign up? It's a one-time use, and as long as they're management of the property.
So under the sign code right now, under signs allowed without a permit, so exempted permits, nameplates indicating the name, address, or profession of the occupant not exceeding 1 square foot is exempt from actually the sign code.
Yeah, that's what they
itself.
are. Yeah,
So
Oh,
they're
no, they're 2 square
probably
feet.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
the ones that I've seen walking down when I house sit for my mom, they're not that big. I mean, they're maybe a foot,
I was just
foot and a
wondering,
half
I
square
mean, it's a
foot,
stream
but-
of revenue. So,
It
Well,
also
and if we-
creates a trail of,
And if we look at the bed and breakfast ordinance, it's actually written in there that signing is limited to a 1.5 square foot nameplate, non-illuminated. It's not written in the VRD ordinance. It's something that could be added. It could be added as a condition too, that, you're in your conditions of use. All the vacation rental applications are conditional use permits. So you as the planning commission can put conditions on them. There's a list of 20 standard conditions we use now. If there's something unique about the property, us in the planning department will add additional conditions to it to help maintain the residential character of the neighborhood.
To
But-
Kathy's point, I think it makes a lot of sense to mandate that because, you know, if there's a house and that has a big issue, how are you going to figure out who the owner is or who the local contact is unless you know to go to the city website and search through? But if there's a sign that says who the contact is, you know it's a vacation rental and you know how to get a hold of someone. It makes a lot of sense.
Or you know that it's supposed to be a vacation rental,
Yeah,
or maybe
right.
it's not, and they are using it.
I mean, it is
as
a
such.
commercial use in a residential zone, so we should at least make it clear what's going on.
We had this discussion about a year ago, remember that?
Yes, I do.
And it was all about putting a sticker on the window or something.
Right.
Of the same, and it
It
was.
was a sticker.
Yeah, it was a
Yeah.
sticker, and it was a toss-up, because I understand your point of view, absolutely. And then there's the other side of the coin. Okay, this is a vacation rental. Nobody's here. I'm going in. And it's a draw. So, I mean, so it's six of one and half a dozen of another.
We also require when a property management company changes or a local contact changes, they need to notify their neighbors within 100 feet. And now, when I get that change of property management notification, the local contact form, that's also a policy of the planning commission, I'll actually send the property managers the list. Here's the neighbors within 100 feet and their addresses. Make sure you send them a note, let them know the property management company changed.
Do we follow up on that?
I have no way of easily following up on that, no, but it's an honor system type thing.
Okay.
But,
The expectation is there.
so do we want Jeff to write up anything else at this point?
I would just say I think we made great progress tonight on a few
do.
issues that have been kind of plaguing us for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm so glad to see this dais full.
Can I throw one out there that has been a
Please.
request of the property management companies? And it has to do with condition number 17. That's one of your standard conditions for conditional use permit. It reads, grace period. If a currently licensed VRD sells to another party, staff is allowed to grant a temporary grace period of not more than 60 days in which current bookings can be cleared without being recognized as a violation. Since we've gone to the provision of not allowing applications until the property is owned by the applicant, we've really cut into that 60-day time frame where the property managers are now struggling to make sure they can still honor people's vacations without being in violation. And I know more than one property manager has asked to see if that can be increased to 90 days. If it goes further with the time frame of ownership, it may become a moot point. Or it could need to be extended farther depending on, sometimes these folks are booking these houses a year in advance. Not that we want to maybe go that far, but a lot of them are booking up, and it puts the property managers in a tough position to be in compliance if it's still going through the permitting process, because our permitting process can take a couple of months to get through.
How many times does this become an issue?
It's brought to my attention quite often. I don't have the ability to monitor every booking that they have, but they do bring it up to me that, hey, I've got a booking in 2 months. Is that going to be okay? And it's right on the line. They don't want to cancel somebody's family vacation, especially when properties sell this time of year and that 60-day mark is hitting the June, July, August season. So it's just something that's been brought to my attention to see if they can extend that.
I think at this point, I'd like to leave it where it's at. That's my 2 cents. Anybody else have an opinion on that?
What, pardon, what, like, how much longer are they asking for?
Just to 90 days.
Oh,
So
to
from
90.
60 to 90.
60 to 90 days.
Our permitting process typically takes about 60 days, start to finish. I'm trying to speed it up as much as we can, but if it's going to continue being used as a vacation rental, those bookings are already on the books, farther out than 60 days typically. And oftentimes the new owner does maintain the same property management company, and they like to honor those bookings. Like I said, especially when we get into this time of year where this entire summer is booking up now, and if the property sells, then bookings after 60 days would have to be canceled.
So is that 60 days from time of sale? Sale is complete, or application?
That's 60 days from the time of sale. Previously, they were allowed to apply before they closed on the house. So as they're going into closing, the application process and their escrow period are happening at the same time. Now that's gone. So there's 3 weeks to 30 days that could possibly have been taken out, waiting to close actually on the sale. Once the property changes hands officially is when the old permit is expired and taken out of the system. So the grace period is from that point until 60 days right now. And I've had property managers ask to see if they can go to 90.
Well, I don't see a problem with 90 when it takes you 60 days to go through the process, and that gives staff actually more time to go through the process, maybe even more thorough than you do now.
I would actually agree.
I,
be honest
I
with you.
agree too.
It takes the I think it's give and take. If that's what's going to, I mean, I don't see a reason why not.
Well, if it's in an R3 zone and the reduction of the density kicks in, there's no guarantee that that property is going to be approved.
How many of these cases are we talking about? Are we talking about?
That's what I'm asking.
I don't know because I don't know them all. I know it does get asked of me, and that's a lot of times because the property manager or the owner doesn't know if they have a grace period. And then we talk about it and then like, oh shoot, we've got bookings 4 months from now and I got to cancel those. And that 4 month away booking might be a July or August weekend that's been planned for a long time. And it's when it only comes really to light when the property is going from one vacation rental owner who's applying to also continue as a vacation rental. If it's going to be taken off the vacation rental pool, for lack of a better term, typically those bookings are canceled and because the owner wants to use their house.
So we are proposing a 90-day waiting period after purchasing before they could even apply, which means that this would give them the window to continue to the license and then be able to apply, which negates our 90-day waiting period
Right.
for a new ownership. So I was leaning towards the 90 days would be okay, because I was also factoring in different closing things, but that happens before. So if we're proposing that a new owner of a property would have to wait 90 days after they purchase a home to be able to apply, then the 90-day grace period is irrelevant.
Well-
And so
And 90 days was just a number that I chose and tossed out there. I believe somebody mentioned that another city does 3 years. So it's
new construction.
That's
or,
new
on new
construction.
construction. Okay, my apologies. So I mean, it doesn't have to be 90 days. It could be 120 days. I mean,
Right.
whatever is appropriate. But I mean,
Right, but
So I
here's
guess
the-
I'm
wait-
kind of
wait a minute.
confused here
We're-
because
yeah, we're getting really-
you're talking about one, a vacation rental that is going to remain a vacation rental.
Not guaranteed.
No,
vacation
if
rentals
if
are-
you buy the property and it's a vacation rental and you're going to sell, the buyer is going to maintain it as a vacation rental, they have 60 days, do they not?
This is right now 60 days to clear out bookings. They're not to be taking
Okay.
any new bookings during that
So,
time.
if they have a vacation rental and it goes to a different owner, that they don't automatically selling the license, then they have to go before the, okay.
Correct. It's an
Okay,
all new permitting
I
process.
misunderstood.
Yeah.
That's
We're-
it's
we're
been a
missing
day
the-
or two,
Yeah.
so.
The
We're
license
missing the
does
point
not
here.
travel with the
Okay.
property.
And then just for clarification, it's to clear out bookings. It's not to be taking new bookings. It's not for the new owner to start taking bookings.
Right.
It's
Right.
clear out bookings that are already
So
scheduled.
it's just the bookings, it's.
Yes.
Okay.
Existing.
It just we're giving them an extra 30 days to complete the bookings they've already got. That's all it is. We're not granting them anything.
Okay.
Instead of having all the bookings done in 60 days, which
That's what's,
I'm not picking on you, Jeff, but Jeff might not be able to get that to 62 days. That's letting that go through.
and if the person who purchases the previous VRD decides not to even apply, well, those bookings
Yeah,
are canceled.
they're gonna be canceled anyway, right.
So that's, you know,
From a staff perspective, how how does the 60 days affect you, and how would the 90 days affect you?
It doesn't necessarily affect us. This is very difficult for us to track. I'll preface by that, especially now being down staff. I'm stressed pretty thin. It's a little harder to keep on top of the vacation rental world as much as I was before. What it does help is people who have scheduled a vacation to come to Seaside, and now, oops, in 60 days, my booking is 70 days, and now my property manager has to cancel because it's a requirement of the city, and you cancel come May, June, you're not going to find another place to stay in Seaside in the summer. So this gives the property managers the ability to honor bookings that they made in good faith. They didn't know the property was going to go for sale, to close those out without having to cancel family vacations.
May I ask our one public in the room a question?
Of course.
Just checking with work session, we aren't,
Aaron, can
Do
you
you
come
know
up to the
Aaron?
table?
yes, no, but that's,
No, I'm
Yeah.
asking, do you know her?
yes, well,
Yeah.
yeah,
We all do, but I didn't know if Kathy did.
we need the microphone,
This is Aaron, introduce yourself and all that.
microphone.
Microphone.
I'm Aaron Barker, and I do both long-term and short-term rentals. When you were talking about this grace period, I'm the one that brought this up years ago. So I think you need to understand why this question came up. So we had a large house at 234 12th years ago, and it's had changed owners since then. But at that time, under the old rules, it slept 16, so it was a big family reunion house. It was like 8 bedrooms, 5 bathrooms, 5, I don't know, parking spaces. Maybe it was 5 bedrooms. That house sold. We had a family here Sunday to Sunday in the middle of July. Well, they listed it for sale and it closed on Wednesday. So we ended up prorating the rent, and the new buyers said, well, I'll be happy to honor the rest of the bookings. And I went to the city and I said, what do we do? I mean, technically we're in violation, but none of us want to be. We're not trying to do anything or skirt around a rule, but it's a pretty harsh penalty to say, oh, sorry, back up, it closed, there's no license, you're gonna have to wait. So this gave us a phase-out period so that even if the owner wasn't going to get a license, but they were willing to say, yeah, well, that's fine, I'll honor these bookings for this period of time, the 60 days. And that pretty much helped you if it was right in the middle of summer where you had no, I'll scoot them here or there.
So, Aaron, in a lot of cases, the property management company is handling all the bookings, and the owner is probably not even aware of a lot of them, right? And so the property management company is kind of on the hook for those. Is that what you're saying?
Well,
it sounds
if
like
we're
it's on the owner.
managing it and somebody, puts up a house for sale and says, oh, I'm closing Friday, but I've got people out there, the people farther out, I have a better shot at moving them unless it's August.
Yeah.
Sometimes we have to beg and say, oh, how are we going to get through this? Because it's late. I mean, I don't have any place to put these other people. You could call your competitors. You can do anything. The farther out you get, the more you can push that burden on to that person. They've got at least some time, but you can't give them, oh, sorry, next week, and there can actually be consequences. There can be reciprocal penalties. Like now you're on the hook to actually pay them to go somewhere.
Yeah.
Which then we would have to put that on the owners. So, and we had all talked about this. All it is a period to allow them, if they're applying, and it would take approximately 60 days, that it would allow for a smooth transition of the same property from one rental to the same property to a new owner. And then occasionally it will come up that owner is not going to continue, but they also aren't planning on taking possession, and they're okay with that 60-day time frame, or, okay, well, we're here, that's 5 or 6 weeks or 4 weeks, or we honor this next 2 weeks, and then, that's it that we have. If we can work that out privately with those owners, we've operated that, made that work out that way, just to phase it out without putting, people who may have made plans well in advance to have such a harsh penalty, because it makes you, when a house goes up for sale, you just want to say, nobody wants to touch it, because houses have been for sale for years in the past, literally years, and now they're going like that. So, I mean, I've had vacation rental homes that I managed that took literally 3 years to sell, sometimes more. Every summer it was like, is this the summer? Is this the summer?
To
Scary.
Brandon's point originally, what if the rule for new vacation rentals was only on a waiting period was only on new vacation rentals? So if it's already on the vacation rental market and it goes from vacation rental owner to vacation rental owner, there's no gap there. We could give them a 90-day window. But if it's a new house that's turning to a vacation rental from a long-term rental, that's when they got to take more time and invest in the community before we make that flip. Just a thought.
Well,
That makes
again,
sense?
It does, but again, you're not guaranteed that that property is going to be able to be approved as a vacation rental.
True, but even if they want it approved, it's going to take them. Are you talking about ones that are already vacation rentals?
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Right,
Because as soon as they
So you
drop
allow
out
a
of the
grace
pool.
period or not? I mean, that would be the
Right.
debate.
right, right.
At least
I mean,
you've
the
got that
60 days.
off-ramp. You've got an off-ramp
Yeah,
that's,
the 60 days, I think, is a great window. As a VRD owner, I was on my calendar all the time. I knew exactly what I had booked, you know. So, I mean, I could see it. It's right there. And if we were going to sell the house, even when we decided not to use it as a short-term rental anymore and turn it into long-term, yes, it was still booked out, but you know, that's the owner's decision. So the property management did find places for those other people to go and you know, gratefully. It was in September, so it wasn't as harsh as
after
June.
Labor Day, you're,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah, I know,
this is when
everybody's-
it comes in, you know, June, July, and August, where,
Right.
I mean, you could look 50 miles away and, you know, you're going to, I don't know if anyone remembers, but years ago when it was called Chateau Stenbury, Don Stensland had it. You might remember that, just south of, it was 12 bedrooms, 12 bathrooms. Just Avenue A, and an adjacent property caught fire and
Oh, yeah.
damaged that one, and it
Right.
never, that was my first year working here in 1999. I'd come in the fall, and that spring was when that fire happened, and I had to call and cancel and refund money like crazy, and people were just bawling at me on the phone because they weren't going to rebuild that. There was nothing else like that ever anywhere. And for 5 years, I still got phone calls. Have they rebuilt that? Have they rebuilt that?
yeah,
So
yeah, that was a big fire.
that was a hard spring, listening to those people cry and then still call me.
So did you get your question
You
answered?
answered my question without me even asking it, so,
Well, there you go.
all right.
So my thought is still 60 days. Anybody else?
I think 60 days is a good window.
I don't have an opinion. I let you guys decide.
So
I'm
just,
sticking with my 90, but that's my opinion.
Yeah. I'm for 90, but that's fine if you guys want to keep it at 60. I mean, the only thing we're doing is, if we moved it to 90, is helping Aaron's business not cancel something. You know,
That's kind of what I was getting at, Lou, is they get the heat for it. It's not the
Yeah.
property owners.
Yeah, it's not the property owner. It's the property management company.
they get the 1 star and-
Yeah.
Yeah. I can go either way. June, July, August is crunch time, and that's 3 months, so.
The 90 days wasn't an issue, or the 60 days wasn't an issue until they weren't allowed to apply until after they owned the home, because that took away a period of time that ate away at that 60 days. That's when it became the issue. I didn't hear about it before that. And then when that policy was put into place is when, oh no, we've got bookings farther out, and the clock started, and there was no way to get around it.
well, in the count, it looks like more 90 than 60, so
I'll go 90.
write down 90, Jeff.
90.
Let's go to bed.
Yeah, write down 90. So unless anybody has anything else,
What I'll do is I'll get some language down on paper. Next planning commission meeting during ordinance administration, we can, you guys can read over it, make sure it says what you want it to say, and from there we'll decide how to proceed.
That sounds great.
Perfect.
One quick question, can you ask the city attorney to come to that meeting, please?
I can see if he's available.
He lives in Baker City.
So,
He's,
He can zoom-
I'm just
He can
saying.
zoom in.
yeah, he can zoom.
Yeah, oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
He can zoom in.
I
That's-
mean,
that's a
that
good
will,
point.
that will answer our questions.
Yes,
Or-
that's a good point.
And if you guys wanted a joint session with the city council, I was just looking at it on the calendar. It would have been May, but that would have been Memorial Day, or Memorial Day. So you wouldn't be looking till August for the
Well-
next fifth Monday.
We don't have to have a joint session to present this to,
I just heard talks
Yeah.
about it. I just
Yeah.
looked it up, just letting you know it would be quite a bit away.
yeah, no problem.
That
So,
gi-
but
that
talk-
gives us time to make sure our stuff's all in one bag.
So, speaking of city council, our last recommendation to review
thank you.
and completely redo the comp plan involved budgeting. Is that being carried forward to the budget committee? And when are they meeting, and how do we make sure that that gets on their agenda?
I will, I'll bring it up to the city manager. I haven't been given any direction in that other than making sure that recommendation was made to the council officially.
Yeah, that was,
Okay.
February 28th, it was Kevin's last day.
Yeah.
The last item of the agenda, just before everybody walked out the door.
I think the council kind of has their hands full right now, so maybe we wait
Oh,
until.
come on, that's what they're for.
But it's gotta be budgeted for. That's
That's
the
what they're
thing.
for. Okay.
It's not that they have to they have to dig into it, but they have to budget for a consultant to do that.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay,
All right.
with that,